and welcome to Decoding the Digital Eye with CSols, the podcast that offers firsthand accounts using data-driven tools to enhance your LIMS software. I'm your host, Megan Pettyjohn, and in this series, we're highlighting real-world applications and management of LIMS and ELN systems. In today's episode, we'll be discussing predictive analytics, why you should use them, and where to start. I'm very excited to welcome Ken Alves. Ken is a forward-thinking life science consultant specializing in laboratory informatics. He's been working with them for about 10 years, with experience doing so from the client side, the consultant side, and the vendor side. But what's really different about Ken is he has a lab of the future mindset and explores cutting-edge technologies, including AI, digital twins, and predictive analytics, to drive digital transformation and advance the science more efficiently. He's been exploring a lot of new avenues, and I'm very excited to have him here today to share some of that with us. Hi, Ken. Welcome.
Hi, Megan. How you doing?
Doing good. All right, Ken. So for the listeners who don't know, we have had the chance to work with each other in the past, and I've always admired your vast knowledge and thirst for learning. So I definitely wasn't surprised to see your growth into the digital transformation space. Your role is expanded beyond the traditional LIMS implementation. Can you share a little bit about how you got on that path?
Yeah, sure. I started my career as a research scientist in the pharmaceutical industry, doing discovery research, looking for the next biologics, and vaccines and antibodies, things like that. While there, I got involved in the informatics world through both bioinformatics and also through an ELN implementation. I moved over, because of my background, to a LIMS company where I was involved in doing LIMS implementations and systems integrations, and working with all different types of labs, like QC labs, R&D labs, clinical labs. Over time, I moved over to consulting, and over time, I did a lot of projects in this area. And I kept seeing the same patterns in the labs. Were collecting massive amounts of data, but they were usually mostly reactive. So instead of asking, they were asking, what happened because of the data, but they weren't asking, what's about to happen. With the increase in AI and all the technologies in AI and machine learning that have been coming out in the past couple of years. Predictive analytics naturally emerged from that gap. So once labs started connecting instruments and LIMS and STMS systems, IoT sensors, things like that, and to data lakes, it became obvious that the real value wasn't just digitalization of the data; it was actually anticipation of the data itself, what they could do. So preventing failures, predicting bottlenecks. So that's what pulled me into the space.
I heard you say predictive analytics, another buzzword, digital twins. They get thrown around a lot. For a lab manager focused on efficiency and compliance, why do these technologies matter today?
So mostly they shift the lab from being a reactive control lab to a proactive control lab. So for example, in the efficiency space, you're not just fixing downtime. So when an instrument goes down, you're fixing the downtime. You're now preventing it because you're predicting when it's going to happen. You're not reacting to backlogs in laboratory workflows. You're predicting when they're going to happen. In the compliance area, this is huge because predictive models can help you identify data integrity risks. So things like instrument drift, method variability, environmental excursions. Process deviations before they become deviations or CAPAs or even audit findings from the regulatory agencies. So instead of compliance being something that you defend, it becomes something you basically design into your operations, which is a completely different mindset shift.
Okay, moving compliance from a defensive hurdle to a structural advantage. I love that. I love that mindset. What are the specific AI enablers that make this possible now versus 5 years ago? Is it just cloud computing?
Yeah, cloud computing is part of it, but it's not the main story right now. So the enablers that are coming out, you could basically fit into a lot of different categories. So there's data connectivity, so using like modern instrument integration, APIs, middleware, UNS architecture for standardizes your data, which brings in data standardization. So metadata models, harmonized schemas, fair data principles, which is a big thing that's out now. Another area is streaming data pipelines. So you have real time data movement. It's not like some batch upload, like every hour, whatever's changed, upload to the data lake. It's coming in in real time. And things like edge and IoT platforms. So it's continuous environmental and equipment monitoring, things like that. It's not just cloud; it's the whole data architecture that didn't really exist before.
Yeah, you mentioned a lot. Some of those topics we have covered in our season 1 on the podcast episode. The fair data principles are hot. Everybody's talking about them,
Yep.
and not trying to understand them and apply them. In previous conversations, you had mentioned that digital twins originated in manufacturing. Can you share how that concept translates to the lab?
Yeah, so in manufacturing, digital twin models a production line or models an individual machine that's used in the production. But in the lab, while you can also monitor instruments in the laboratory, it models behavior. So you can think it models your sample flow or your instrument utilization, your method performance, the workflows going on in the lab. So instead of a twin of a machine, you get a twin of your operations, which allows simulation. So you can ask questions like, well, what happens if we add 20% more samples to our workflow? What would happen if an instrument goes down? Or anything along those natures, anything that can affect your workflow, you can actually now simulate through a digital twin, which is incredibly powerful for planning purposes and compliance.
You say that, and I think of a flight simulator, but like for the lab, you get to crash the plane in a digital world, so you don't have to do it in a real one.
Right. And the good thing is that in a digital twin, it uses real world data. So you're actually feeding it the real data that's coming off of what's going on, and it's using that to make these predictions and simulations.
Most of our listeners live in their limbs. How does predictive analytics actually sit alongside that data?
So LIMS is your system of record, whereas your predictive analytics platform really is your systems of intelligence. So even now, some of the bigger LIMS platforms are starting to integrate their own predictive analytics into their systems. So like typically a LIMS would feed your structured operational data. Instruments feed raw data to like the data lake. Your IoT sensors will feed environmental and equipment data. And your analytics platform, sits on top of all this data lake, and it uses it to make these predictions. So it's not there to eliminate your LIMS. It's there to augment it.
Pulling out something you said, LIMS tells us what happened, but the intelligence layer tells us what will happen.
What will happen?
Yeah. Beyond just automation, what specific pain points does this alleviate for the scientists on the bench or the QA manager reviewing data? Is it mostly about speed, or are there quality elements too?
It's both, but quality is probably the bigger win here. So for scientists, you get things like fewer reruns or fewer surprises popping up in your testing, more reliable methods, or less firefighting in the laboratory. But for QA, you get more of a predictive deviation detection, a trend-based risk scoring, proactive audit readiness. So while speed does improve through the use of predictive analytics, the trust in the data improves even more, which is foundational for a QC laboratory, especially, which has to operate under all the regulatory agencies.
Yeah. Would you say that the ultimate goal here is peace of mind, less time spent troubleshooting, more time actually doing the science?
I think the number one thing is, I think peace of mind is a good thing, but it's forcing more compliance. It's forcing you into compliance more so than like the peace of mind. You have peace of mind because you're doing things right and data is good. But it's
Okay.
that.
If a lab wants to start piloting predictive analytics software, who would you say are the best players that they should be looking at? And what requirements should that software meet?
I mean, you're looking at different layers of players, I guess. So like you have there's data platforms. So people like TetraScience, Databricks, Snowflake, all fit in that kind of that data platform layer. From an AI ML platforms, you have companies like Data IKU, excuse me, Data Robot, AWS. Has AI services also that work in this as does Azure. Then there's the lab specific like intelligence platforms. So companies like Elemental Machines and Cytara, come to mind as companies that work in that space. So it's a combination of all those really. So from a requirements perspective, things that kind of matter are like GMP, GXP readiness is something you need to keep in mind. Your data lineage, traceability, which goes back to the fair data type of concepts, expandable AI, your validation strategy. How you're going to validate this to be ready to defend it to the agencies. How well these systems will integrate with LIMS and the other systems, the security model they offer, things like that, or even the ability to audit the data coming out of it. So basically, if you can't support validation and traceability, it's not really a system you'll be looking at. So these are things you really need to look at.
Nice. Yeah, knowing where to start is always the hard part, and evaluating
Mhm.
solutions can be a little overwhelming sometimes. So, yeah,
Right.
thank you for that. Some of that tech stack options. I'm sure it'll be a great starting place for some lab managers who are beginning their predictive analytics journey. So, when a lab director or manager is evaluating these tools, what is the one question they should ask themselves to ensure that they don't buy vaporware?
Simply to me, it's like, can this system explain its predictions in a way that a QA and auditors will accept? If the answer is, it's a black box model and, it can't really show you how it comes to these determinations, and you probably want to walk away from that. But if they can show you the traceability of the lineage, how explain how the predictions was made, the decisions, excuse me, were made, then it is it's a platform you should be definitely looking at. But if they can't do all these things, then you probably want to walk away from
Yeah,
it.
makes sense. Should adding predictive analytics be a priority for labs this year?
I would say yes if you have all the prerequisites in place. Um, you know, you don't want to be doing things for technology's sake. So if your lab is still battling, the same basic issues that a lot of labs to this, are still are, manual transcription of data, missing metadata, your instruments aren't integrated yet, then your priority should be to focus on those things first. So you should be looking at things like the data architecture first, your integration strategy to other systems, standardization of your data, the governance of your data, your instrument connectivity. Um, because predictive analytics is going to be as good as the data you put into it. So if your data is a mess, your predictive analytics are not going to be good. But if you already have like decent captured your data and you have stable processes, predictive analytics should be something you should be exploring. And at the very least, it should be on your roadmap somewhere to be looking at, no matter where your laboratory digitization is at the current moment. You should be starting to think about these things. But if you are looking at it now, you probably want to start small. So doing things like um, predicting out of spec and out of trends, or trying to predict earlier deviation. So basically, your best approach, if you decide to go through this, is really just to do pilots. Start with a small, prove your value on that pilot, and then scale from there.
It's a good idea. As we come to an end of this podcast episode, there's one thing we like to ask all of our guests. If you could offer one piece of advice or a pro tip to the listeners to help them deliver excellence with predictive analytics, what would it be?
I would say don't start with the technology, or don't do something for technology's sake. You want to start with a decision. So you want to ask yourself, what decisions, what do we want to improve in the laboratory? what risks do we want to reduce? What outcome do we want to predict? Start with that, and then you build backwards, basically, to your technology solution. Having that in place, again, puts you in a place where you're not just doing technology for technology's sake. You're actually solving a problem that really needs to be solved in the laboratory. A lot of people come, especially at higher levels, think, well, we need to integrate AI, but they don't necessarily have an answer as to what are you going to do with it. So starting, with the basic problems first will be the best way to go. It's not a technology project. It's it's a decision enablement strategy. That's basically what you're trying to implement.
A perfect note to end on. Focus on the outcome you want to change, and the technology will follow. Ken, thank you so much for joining us and sharing your expertise today.
You're welcome, Adam.
So that's all the time we have for today's episode of Decoding the Digital Lab with CSols. Please join us next time. Hit that follow button if you're enjoying this content. And as always, if there's a topic you want to hear us cover, please leave it in the comments. Oh, don't forget about our weekly industry newsletter to get the latest and greatest highlights on current events. It's free to sign up for. You can find the link on the screen in the episode bio on Spotify and YouTube. Till next time.